Hello, and thank you for joining Helaman's Army today. Another continuation on the Consecration versus Communism discussion. This time I'm talking about David O. McKay. So the thing about David O. McKay is that this has been very overwhelming. The latest videos, the Heber J. Grant and George Albert Smith, I actually recorded those a week ago. And even though they showed up early, in this week, I've been studying David O. McKay ever since, and quite frankly, David O. McKay is extremely overwhelming when it comes to this talk, to this topic, simply because there is so much out there. And if you go into the description of this video, you will find a link to everything that I read, everything that I looked at, and some of the stuff I'm still reading. So I've been able to narrow it down. With this video, I just had to narrow it down to and I've got 6 general conference talks that I'm going to discuss today. But because it was so overwhelming, and because there was so much data and so much information, I've stuck all of that into the description. So you'll see the 6 sources that I'm using, and then you'll see a whole list, massive list of sources that I'm not using. I want to say there was something like 13 or 14 general conference talks where communism is discussed. And then there's some things in which he quotes in general conference, which I'm going to share, and then a book he recommends, which I'm going to talk about just a little bit. And then another documentation that I found that I'm not talking about or discussing. But there's just so much information on David O. McKay, and it's very clear to me that we don't have David O. McKay without Heber J. Grant, and J. Reuben Clark, by the way. So if you remember, in the Heber J. Grant video, I read the warning to the members of the church. It was signed by the First Presidency. At the time was Heber J. Grant, J. Reuben Clark, and David O. McKay. I'm not sharing that in this video. If you'd like to learn about that, you can go back to the Heber J. Grant video. The link to that warning is again in the description of this video, but I will not be discussing it in this video. But just a reminder that David O. McKay was one of the signatories to that warning to the members that was published in the Improvement Era in August of 1938. So, suffice it to say, David O. McKay really put on a staunch fight against communism, the best he knew how, and it is quite the history of David O. McKay and is quite fascinating. So, with that said, let's get started here. First, I'm going to go through these general conference talks. I'm going to go through them chronologically, and not and I'm not going to bounce around. It's just going to be year by year. So we're starting in 1939. So remember that the warning to the members came out in 1938. So 1939 is when he starts talking about communism in general conference. Let's see if I can get the right page here. Okay, so he starts talking about anti-Americanism sowing discord. So I'm not actually going to read all this for you or through with you, but he mentions this article. This is written by, and it's underlined here in green, Dr. William F. Russell, Dean of Teachers College in Columbia University, in an address, How to Tell a Communist and How to Beat Him. Now, this is one of the articles that is linked in the description, and you're welcome to read through the whole thing, but he quotes quite a bit of this article, as you can see right here, all the way, let me see if I can get my finger, all the way from here all the way down to the yellow is quoted as directly out of that publication. I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm just going to share this first statement right there. Communist leaders have steadily insisted that communism cannot live in just one country. Just as we fought to make the world safe for democracy, so they are fighting to make the world safe for communism. And that basically sums up what he's talking about in the article. And he also goes through quite a bit about, and this was actually the reason that I have this part memorized, or not memorized, underlined, is because this is their method of working their way to the seizure of power. He describes as follows. So there are certain things and tactics that people do, that communists do, to get other people on their side. So they talk about peace. They talk about social equality, especially among those most oppressed. They talk about organization of labor and penetrate into every labor union. They talk on soapboxes, publish pamphlets and papers, orate and harangue, play on envy, arouse jealousy, separate class from class, try to break down the democratic process from within, accustom the people to picketing strikes, mass meetings, constantly attack the leaders in every way possible so that the people will lose confidence. Then, in time of national peril, during a war, on the occasion of a great disaster, or on a general strike, walk into the capital and seize the power. A well-organized minority can work wonders. So I want to bring that up for a couple of reasons. One is I was asked to do a video on why people are attracted to communism or even socialism, and this is just the generic playbook. Is that they first start by talking about peace and social equality, even among the oppressed, especially. But we've seen this in the United States. We've seen this dramatically. We saw this in the 60s, which, by the way, in the 1960s, there was a dramatic explosion of talking about communism in general conference. And it wasn't just David O. McKay or Ezra Taft Benson. There were a lot of men who were talking about communism, including Marion G. Romney, J. Reuben Clark. J. Reuben Clark passed away earlier. So it wasn't J. Reuben Clark in the 60s, but he talked about it quite a bit. Mark E. Peterson was also a big, strong opponent to communism, and it was talked about by quite a few members of the 70s as well. Communism was just this massive explosion of a subject in the 1960s, and it's interesting to me that we're seeing the same things happening today, but we're not having any opposition to it, which is really disturbing to me anyway. So that's really all I wanted to share out of this one. And like always, he ends this conversation. He talks about the Constitution next, and that you'll notice that that's a pattern, and that's a pattern for a really good reason. And I'll talk about that in a future video on why they always talk about the Constitution after they discuss communism. Let's see. Let's move to the next one here, because I think I've covered that one well enough. Basically, just go read this general conference talk and go read the article that he suggests to read. Okay, so I believe this is the next one. Nope, I didn't get the right one there. Hold on. They all have the same name, and they all have a very similar color. Oops. Okay, this one here. So October of 1940, we're going to go to page 101. And there's only a couple things here that I really want to talk about. Again, there's just so much on David O. McKay. It's really hard to narrow it all down. But there's a couple of statements he makes in this general conference. European monarchies have been overthrown, and rising out of the monarchical ruins have come the dictatorship of the proletariat in Russia, the fascist regime in Italy, the Nazi rule in Germany, and the fascist form of government in Spain. So just to make it clear, because there seems to be this like massive amount of cognitive dissonance about the Nazi regime. These guys, the name Nazi is Nationalist Socialist Republic. It was the Nationalist Socialists. That's where the name Nazi comes from. So just keep that in mind, because they weren't just fascist because, hey, they were fascist. They were socialists too. Okay, continuing on. If in the spirit of charity, we say that misguided men have brought all this about because of their desire for a better government, the fact still remains that civilization is encompassed by social upheavals that threaten to divert, if not entirely thwart, the progress and happiness of the present generation. Humanity is passing through one of its most crucial experiences. We are in the midst of a revolution, both of thought and mode of life. Beliefs of parents are questioned. Old ideals are in the discard. Communism, Nazism, fascism, totalitarianism are giving birth to new conceptions that strike relentlessly at beliefs and teachings, which were accepted in a decade ago as fundamentals and unassailable. Under the influence of a science as superficial as proud, writes M. Paul Gaultier, a leading publicist of France, old beliefs have been turned into ridicule, conscience is treated as superstition, and honesty as a prejudice. Self-interest alone remains as a motive, and pleasure as the sole end of life. For too many people, he continues, evil consists not in infringing social laws, but in getting caught. Morality and duty figure in their eyes as so many prejudices out of fashion and vestiges of centuries gone by. So again, the reason I brought this up and decided to talk about this is that we're seeing a lot of this today. Again, like I said on the last General Conference talk that we talked about, and also that there's a couple things he points out. Let me get the right thing here. If in the spirit of charity, we say that misguided men have brought all this about because of their desire for a better government. So we see people pushing for socialism or communism out of the spirit of charity. It's one of the things that they go for. They go for the oppressed, the people who don't make as much money, the people who just the regular hardworking people in the United States, in America. They go for those people and say, hey, you deserve to have this. And then they come out with their tax the rich stuff. And quite frankly, it's not, you could tax the rich all day long and have them run out of money, but eventually it's all going to run out if we don't stay industrious and don't keep at the hard work. And the problem with the socialism and the communism is that you get something for nothing, and then your motivation to work is gone. There is no motivation, and that's the basic problem with it. So self-interest also, back to the talk here, said self-interest also remains as a motive and pleasure as the sole end of life. So in our culture in the United States, this has become this has been advertised for so long now that this is what people expect. They expect self-interest to be their motive, and they expect pleasure as the sole end of their life. That's the entire purpose of life, is to seek out pleasure, because it's been advertised for so long, and that's become a major problem. All right, so again, read this one. This is a very good General Conference talk, and we will move on to the next one. I believe this is the next one. I hope. There it is. Good. Okay, this is April in 1948, and we're going to head down to page 70. This is just a short little quote. He talks about the world. Back then, they talked about a lot of different subjects when they were given General Conference talks. They would go over 3 or 4 different subjects, and this is just the end of this conference talk. And just a simple quote: "The choice today is between dictatorship with the aesthetic teachings of communism and the doctrine of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, obedience to which alone can make us free." So he's saying, hey, it's you get to choose. It's either communism or it's Jesus Christ. Make your choice. Which is interesting, because if you remember back to the John Taylor video, it was a while back, when John Taylor's having his conversation with the French socialists, they're like, hey, what are you going to do to ameliorate the conditions of the human race? And John Taylor's like, I'm just going to keep baptizing people because that's going to fix it. And they don't grasp it. They don't get it. They don't understand. How in the world would that fix it? To them, you're not attacking the problem, but they're looking at the symptoms and not the problem, right? That Jesus Christ does go for the problem. The fullness of the gospel of Jesus Christ attacks directly at the problem, while the socialists and the communists look at the side effects of not having Jesus Christ, and then they try to fix those. It's like a very misguided doctor that keeps trying to give you medications for stuff that you don't need because they're not fixing the actual problem. Okay, on to the next one. That one was short, thankfully. Okay. This is April 1950, and this is actually his closing remarks in General Conference, April 1950, on page 175. Oops. Okay, so this one is actually very interesting. So I'm not going to read everything to you, and I'm not going to share everything with you, but I'm going to share the story the best I can remember it, and hopefully I get it right. But David O. McKay, at this point, he was really kind of in charge of the missions of the church, and he was really he really had a fight with communism at this point. The communism made some really big blows against spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ, and so the Czechoslovakian mission was one of the victims of communism. So I'm just going to read this little bit first here. There's only one sorrowful phase, and that is in Czechoslovakia. But brethren, every member of this church should take a lesson from what has occurred in that communistically dominated land. And if you do not, then you are not using the intelligence and the inspiration to which you are entitled. And then he says, communism is anti-Christ. And it is. I personally would also say socialism is anti-Christ. Not because of the desire to help other people. That's not the anti-Christ. It's using that desire to remove freedom and liberty from people, which is what we see every time that stuff gets into play. So basically what happened with the Czechoslovakian mission, maybe I will read through some of this. So there was a branch president in Czechoslovakia. So starting right here, it says, I'm going to tell you 3 things about communism which are facts. This was just hinted at 6 months ago. One of our brethren, loyal and true, presiding over a branch, held the priesthood just as you and I, had a testimony just as you and I, a prosperous businessman, true to his wife, and has a lovely family. Brother Benson has met him and knows him. Right, so here's the branch president. Ezra Taft Benson knew him, met him, talked to his family, knew him well. They held a well-attended conference together. Brother Toronto was the name of the branch president, being present, and had a spiritual feast. A night or two later, officers entered his home and arrested him. Asked for the charge, he was answered indignantly, "Never mind the charge. Come with us." "I ask to be heard," said the arrested man. "You have already been heard and tried." That is not an exaggeration. That is a fact. And when he was taken that night without even been given a hearing and put into a concentration camp, his wife not knowing where. So here is a branch president that was arrested out of the blue, wanted to know why he was being arrested, for what purpose, and they told him, no, you don't need to know. And then there was another thing which had happened in the Czechoslovakian mission. There were 2 missionaries who were arrested, never charged with anything. They were just thrown in jail. And so this next part is about that. Second, all the imprisonment of the 2 elders, each put in a cell by himself with no communication. The president of the mission could not communicate with them. The U.S. Council could not. And there they remained, charged with what? They did not know, and day after day wondered what would happen to them. They had not violated any law. You and I know that they had not. They were on their way to visit one of the saints who needed comfort. She was up near the Polish border. Perhaps unwittingly they entered a forbidden area, but they did not do it intentionally. Well, they came out all right. They had to leave the country. The third point followed the expulsion from the country of President Toronto and all the elders. Oh, so I got it wrong with President Toronto. He's the president of the mission, not the president of the branch that got arrested. So on the previous story, President Toronto, mission president, branch president is this other guy. So he was expelled from the country with all the other elders. You read in the public press that the Mormon missionaries were government spies. You and I know that is false, of course, and any government or any group of men who would publish it do so in ignorance or with maliciousness. So communism really hit the church hard in Czechoslovakia, what is now the Czech Republic and Slovakia. The mission was forcefully expelled from the country. The members of the church were arrested for no reason. Like, they were never told why they were arrested. Missionaries were arrested because they thought they were spies. And quite frankly, I can't think of any group of people to be less spies than missionaries, because they're so disconnected from everything. Honestly, there were things that happened on my mission that I didn't hear about till 2 or 3 days after it happened. There were a lot of things that happened like that. There was a tornado that went down the middle of Salt Lake City. I found out about that only because we were out tracting, and some guy was like, "Oh yeah, you know what just happened in Salt Lake?" And we're like, "Eh." So the fact that they're being told to the world that these LDS missionaries are spies is just absurd. Of all the people who know the least amount about the government and about the goings on of the culture, it's Mormon missionaries, man. Like, they're utterly clueless when it comes to that subject. When it comes to what's happening around them and with specific people, and they're very knowledgeable. But when it comes to overall, with government and with social things and social unrest, wow, Mormon missionaries are not even close. Anyway, very interesting discussion in this general conference talk. Again, highly recommend reading this one, simply because he talks about each mission, and he talks about why it's important. This is one of the victims of communism, was the Czechoslovakian mission, which really only so at that point then David O. McKay really just digs in, because at that point he's realized that this is an ultimate fight which he's not going to be able to win by himself, and he realizes that it really is a fight, and it's not. This isn't just a game. This is really a fight for freedom and for liberty, religious liberty, religious freedoms, for the ability to go out and worship God and do so without the government coming in and stopping you. Which, ironically, we saw in the United States not too long ago. Okay, I believe this is the next one. Yep, 1959. Okay, so this is the beginning of his general conference talk in 1959. He talks about the false teachings of communism, which is up there, as you can see. But that's actually not what I'm going to talk about today. I would recommend to go read this general conference talk and read this section. But what I wanted to talk about was this little paragraph right here. It says, well, the era through which we are passing is no exception. And he's talking about the corruption and everything happening in Babylon, and all the stuff that had happened to them. On the flyleaf of the book, The Naked Communist by W. Cleon Skousen, we find this quotation. And I admonish everybody to read that excellent book of Chief Skousen's. The quotation is, the conflict between communism and freedom is the problem of our time. It overshadows all other problems. This conflict mirrors our age. It toils its tensions, its troubles, and its tasks. On the outcome of this conflict depends the future of mankind. So what I wanted to bring up here was that, first of all, in General Conference, David O. McKay is saying, hey, go read this book. And I've found a copy of this book for anyone who wants to read it. I've got it on my phone here. I don't know why that didn't turn out very nicely, because it looked much nicer on my phone. Well, there it is. So I've got The Naked Communist here on my phone, and I downloaded it from archive.org. There is a link in the description to this book in PDF format, and if you want to do what I did and download it as an e-reader file, you can do that. It is available in that way, but you can read through it. An e-reader, it has terrible table of contents. But I am in the process of reading this book because of his recommendation. But because there was so much to read with David O. McKay, I haven't really gotten that far into it yet. And this will be eventually the subject of one of the videos. It's not going to be, I'm getting a little tired of talking about communism because there's just been so much about it. But honestly, I'm not going to read the book. I'm not going to talk about the book too much, other than just go through and share a few highlights. That's basically what the video will be. But it is an interesting book, and it's worth reading, at least what I've read so far in it. And I'd highly recommend reading it as well. So I will second David O. McKay's recommendation on that. Okay, so I've got, let's see, how many have I been through? I think we just did 1959, right? So interestingly enough, 1959, it's interesting because in the 60s, so in the 50s, 40s and 50s, David O. McKay talked about communism quite a bit. And then for some reason, after 1959-ish, up through, no, never mind. He still talks about it quite a bit. Never mind. I was going to say he kind of calms down a little bit, but no, he just keeps going. Looking at all the sources here, he just keeps going. So 1966 is going to be the last one I talk about in this video. Again, I'm encouraging everybody to go, if I can find the one from 1966. And it looks like I messed up my my situation here. So let's close that out. Get that out of the way. That was not intended to do. I did not intend to do that. So let's see if I can fix it here in the middle of the video. No, that's going to move me out of the way. Well, that's okay. That was a big oopsie there. Did not intend to do that at all. Okay. So we're talking General Conference in 1966. And then I got to find the page. I know I'm not going to get the right page here, but I'm going to try. We're looking for page 109. Oh, I was off by one. Okay. So this is not the right one. Is this the right one? Let's go back to the top and look at this. No, it's not. It's 1959. Like, why is this not looking right? Let's find the right one here. There we go. There it is. Okay, so this is 1966, April 1966. And this one, so if you recall, at the very beginning of the video, and also in the Heber J. Grant video, I discussed the improvement era, August 1938, where they give a warning to the church members. This is David O. McKay's new and expanded warning to the members of the church. And I'm going to read this whole section. So this is on page 109 in April 1966. Now, this was actually published in a pamphlet form, which was distributed by the church. So this is the statement concerning Statement concerning the position of the Church on communism made by President David O. McKay at the General Priesthood session of the 136th Annual General Conference of the Church held in Salt Lake Tabernacle, Saturday, April 9th, 1966 at 7 p.m. Read by Robert R. McKay. Robert was his son. At this time in his life, David McKay was getting a little quite elderly, quite old, and he was having a difficult time getting up to speak, so this one was read by his son. In order that there may be no misunderstandings by bishops, stake presidents, and others regarding members of the church participating in non-church meetings to study and become informed on the Constitution of the United States, communism, etc., I wish to make the following statements that I have been sending out from my office for some time and that have come under question by some stake authorities, bishoprics, and others. Members are free. Church members are at liberty to act according to their own conscience in the matter of safeguarding our way of life. They are, of course, encouraged to honor the highest standards of the gospel and to work to preserve their own freedoms. They are free to participate in non-church meetings that are held to warn people of the threat of communism, or in any other theory or principle that will deprive us of our free agency or individual liberties vouchsafed by the Constitution of the United States. Church is politically neutral. The Church, out of respect for the rights of all its members to have their political views and loyalties, must maintain the strictest possible neutrality. We have no intention of trying to exercise with the fullest and freest exercise of the political franchise of our members under and within our Constitution, which the Lord declared he has established by the hands of wise men whom he raised up unto this very purpose, and which, as to the principles thereof, the prophet Joseph Smith, dedicating the Kirtland Temple, prayed should be established forever. The Church does not yield any of its devotion or its convictions about safeguarding the American principles and the establishments of government under federal and state constitutions and civil rights of men safeguarded by these. Communism, greatest threat to peace and the spread of God's word to men. The position of this Church on the subject of communism has never changed. We consider it the greatest satanical threat to peace, prosperity, and the spread of God's work among men that exists on the face of the earth. In this connection, we are continually being asked to give our opinion concerning various patriotic groups or individuals who are fighting communism and speaking up for freedom. Our immediate concern, however, is not with parties, groups, or persons, but with principles. We therefore commend and encourage every person and every group who is sincerely seeking to study constitutional principles and awaken a sleeping and apathetic people to the alarming conditions that are rapidly advancing about us. We wish all of our citizens throughout the land were participating in some type of organized self-education in order that they could better appreciate what is happening and to know that what they can do about it. Citizens should educate themselves. Supporting the FBI, the police, the congressional committees investigating communism, and various organizations that are attempting to awaken the people through the educational means is a policy we warmly endorse for all our people. Communism's atheism and hate. The entire concept and philosophy of communism is diametrically opposed to everything for which the Church stands: belief in deity, belief in the dignity and eternal nature of man, and application of the gospel to efforts for peace in the world. Communism is militantly atheistic, and is committed to the destruction of faith wherever it may be found. The Russian Commissar of Education wrote, "We must hate Christians and Christianity. Even the best of them must be considered our worst enemies. Christian love is an obstacle to the development of the revolution. Down with love for one's neighbor. What we want is hate. Only then shall we conquer the universe." On the other hand, the gospel teaches the existence of God as our eternal and heavenly Father and declares, "Him only shalt thou serve." Communism debases and destroys. Communism debases the individual and makes him the enslaved tool of the state, to which he must look for sustenance and religion. Communism destroys man's God-given free agency. No member of this church can be true to his faith, nor can any American be loyal to his trust, while lending aid, encouragement, or sympathy to any of these false philosophies, for if he does, they will prove snares to his feet. So that seems pretty straightforward to me. David O. McKay lays it out, and he lays it out hard. Again, this is the 1966 General Conference. Again, in the 1969 General Conference, there's another repeat, not specifically of this warning, but there is a summary of this warning shared again in the 1969 General Conference. And so all through David O. McKay's presidency, from the time that he was in the first presidency with Heber J. Grant, all the way through his own presidency of the church, he constantly warned about the destructive nature of communism. And it should be made clear that it's all about not only getting something for nothing, it's about destroying God and destroying deity in order to do it. And we're seeing that again today in our day. We're seeing it all over the place, in pretty much every aspect of our lives. We're seeing it, and it doesn't take long to look beyond our own. You can look into the news and find examples of it. And I was asked again to make two separate videos. One is what's the attraction to communism, and then two is what are your thoughts on socialism? I believe that's what the comment said. And so I am going to make a video which encompasses all those, where I'll talk about the characteristics of communism, the characteristics of socialism, and the characteristics of consecration, and why they're all so different. And consecration is wildly different than communism and socialism, significantly different. And remember, consecration is the key. It is the main absolute building on which the crowning United Order rests. So the United Order cannot be built on communism or socialism. It is a false ideology. It is a false philosophy. It is a satanic philosophy. But I will make a video that compares all those three and talks about why people are attracted to those. That video will likely not be using, other than the consecration characteristics, that video will not be using church sources. And to this point, I've used nothing but church sources, and this video has been nothing but about the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I'm a little reluctant to move away from that, because I really love the gospel, and that's the point of this channel. And it's not meant to be a political channel. It's meant to be a channel that supports and loves the gospel of Jesus Christ, as well as the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution does within its ability have an ability to be corrupted, which is talked about by Ezra Taft Benson and by many others, by the way, not just Ezra Taft Benson. So I have some strong opinions about a few of the amendments that we have on the books of the Constitution. And maybe one day I'll get to that, but I don't know that it'll be a part of this video series. But the point is that the more closely constitutionalist we are, the more free and liberty we have, the more freedom we've got. And so that's my goal, is to increase righteousness such that we embrace the Constitution. And we cannot increase righteousness without sharing the gospel. It's exactly how Alma did it. And it's exactly how they were able to go after the Gadianton robbers in the Book of Mormon. There's two times that they were able to quell the Gadianton robbers. Once was by force, and that was, they went into the mountains and they hunted them down. And the second time was by preaching them the gospel of Jesus Christ. They went to them and preached the gospel of Jesus Christ to them. And I believe that is the way to do it. I believe that's the way to make it happen and have lasting peace. You can go kill off a bunch of Gadianton robbers and then others are going to pop up. But if you teach them the gospel, you're going to quell it for quite a while. You're going to until that hatred gets back into people's hearts. So this video, like the last one of George Albert Smith, I'm going to end it with David O. McKay's testimony. And so I leave this message, my message, with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
No one can preside over this church without first being in tune with the head of the church, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He is our head. This is his church. Without his divine guidance and constant inspiration, we cannot succeed. With his guidance, with his inspiration, we cannot fail.